and welcome. We're out here in my backyard, and I've got to take care of feeding my Nightcrawlers today. And a portion of my Nightcrawler population lives out here in this outdoor worm bin, which up until a few weeks ago when spring sprung was my overwinter bin test. And it did great, held up through the whole winter. It wasn't a very harsh winter, but the worms did great. So what's in here other than Nightcrawlers, the European Nightcrawlers? There's also red wigglers in here. As a matter of fact, I would probably say there's more red wigglers in here than European Nightcrawlers. But either way, Nightcrawlers are being fed today, and we're starting here because it is starting to drizzle a little bit, and there's some really wicked weather on its way, so I'm going to try to take care of this really quick before the weather sets in. But it's really just throwing in some food, seeing how they're doing, covering things back up, and then heading for shelter. So let's get going. The foods that they're going to be receiving can be seen here. It ranges from grapes that have started to go bad and dry out, some really spoiled cucumber, and a couple other things such as used coffee grounds, as well as the coffee filter itself, and a couple things that are kind of no-nos usually in a worm bin, but I'm not going to worry about it. Citrus. So before we get started, we're going to do what we normally do, which is we're going to take our handy dandy camper basket and use it to offload some of the leaves that are currently covering up the worms down in the bin, and then we'll have easier access to what's going down in there. You don't have to go far to make it to the section where there's already a nice level of moisture. So the bin has been just like this, uncovered, for 2 weeks now since we last fed it. And I didn't even put on this cardboard covering that I've got here, this circular cardboard that I usually stick inside there to cover things up. I left it uncovered to allow for rainfall to make its way into the bin and make things nice and damp and cozy for the worms. So it's been that way for a couple weeks, during which time there's been a couple rainfalls, but not too much. But the level of moisture in here is really pretty much perfect. Ooh, my gloves are failing me. But as soon as we get down here, we start to see potato peels, I believe, which must have been part of the most recent feeding. You can see worms hanging out, obviously. Everywhere you look, there's a worm or two. But since food was scattered in here pretty much all over the place, you're not going to really find a concentration of worms in here because there's food everywhere for them. And as you make your way down to the bottom of the bin, which isn't very far because it's not a very deep bin, you get down to the point where it's pretty much castings only. So the material across the top of the bin, we saw potato. What else did we see? Some sort of hay or grass maybe, or maybe it's that twine. We have placed some old string in here. Cecil twine string, which I think is all organic fibers, which should be compostable theoretically. So now I'm really turning this thing all over the place, upside down, inside out, and we're seeing a pretty good scattered population of worms. And even though there's still food in here, I think we're here to add food, so we're going to do just that. Let's give them what we intended for them. Number one is going to be what's in this, which is half of a lemon peel, an entire lime that went bad, as well as another lime that was squeezed for its juices. Coffee has already spilled out of its filter, but the filter will stay in here as bedding slash food as well. And then these really pretty much liquidy cucumbers that I'm glad that I pulled out of the refrigerator crisper, and thank goodness it was in a bag because they are pretty much liquid, and I got a feeling that the worms are going to love those. Now, it's not a lot of food, but I don't feed this bin very often. Like I said earlier, this is 2 weeks now since I last fed this bin, and at that time, besides I think the potatoes that we see in there might have been other things that would be more prone to quick consumption, like some melon chunks, I think, if I'm not mistaken, but I really don't remember. It's been a couple weeks now since we last fed. But I'm at a kind of a crossroads now with this bin, because I've got to decide what to do with it. It's a great outdoor worm bin, but normally I use this container as my overflow kitchen waste composting bin that I keep outside the kitchen door, and the things that I don't end up choosing to take down to my worms in my wormery all end up in the outdoor composting container, which, like I said, is normally this container here. And for now I've got another trash pail doubling in that capacity, where all of the kitchen scraps that don't get composted by the wormery get composted out here in the wild. But I really like to consolidate, so it might be a matter of harvesting castings from this bin as well as the castings slash whatever it is that's in the other bin. The other bin was composted by not just worms but other things as well, so whatever it is that's been accumulating in that bin has probably got to be emptied out as well. So we might be back out here in my backyard again soon to tend to these matters, depending on how I choose to proceed. But for now, I think we're done out here. So let's head on down to the wormery and feed the nightcrawlers that are down there. Down here in the wormery, you can see there's a whole lot of stuff going on. But these bins are not the ones we're here to work on. We're here to feed nightcrawlers. Here we have the European nightcrawlers in the VermiBag Mini, and down here on the bottom, we've got the African nightcrawlers in the VermiBag Tote. So we're going to start today by feeding the European nightcrawlers in the VermiBag Mini. We're going to try a little different approach to filming this one today. I'm curious to see how it turns out. I'm not sure if all bags have this, but I know mine does, but I've never used it before, is this little view panel. I think I might have made reference to the possibility of using it at some point. But it's basically a Velcro strap so that when you open up the container, and maybe if there's enough material inside, then you can even get a view of the action happening. I guess in our case we're not quite at that level yet, but we're getting pretty close. But I just thought that that might be a place where we can try to peek in with the camera while we do today's maintenance. So this looks pretty good. This is the view through the little view panel. And as you can see, we've got an assortment of foods laid out here. So now all those of you who were questioning, hey, what happened to the grapes when we fed outside? I felt like I had given them enough, and I just ended up bringing the grapes inside. So those are going to be going to these night crawlers in here. One of these really nasty cucumbers like we fed outside. We've got some obvious things here such as banana peel, potato chunks, and a few pieces of very moldy bread. Something new we did not see here when we last visited this bin was this piece of plastic. It's something I've been doing in all of my bins in the attempt to maintain better moisture levels in the bins. And I definitely like what I'm seeing here, because normally the environment in this bin has been a little bit on the dry side. It gets a great deal of ventilation, and that's the reason I have the entire container wrapped on the outside with bubble wrap. And now with this piece of plastic sheeting across the top, it's allowing any moisture that would normally kick off out of the material and evaporate to get captured by that plastic sheet. Once the temperature cools and the condensate collects and drips back down, creates this nice little terrarium effect. So the worms that we're seeing here are all coming up to take advantage of all that collecting moisture that this new vapor barrier that we installed is causing. And that just causes, I guess, an overall greater interest for these worms to explore the top surface of the material. And they're certainly not bashful about being out in the open and exploring. Although the light that we're providing overhead is a little bit much for them, I'm sure. They don't appreciate the bright light and the dry air flushing in to this nice moist environment that they've got going here. So the interruption will be minimal, I assure you. So let's get this bin fed, and let's close the environment back up so they can continue their great work. So I'm seeing this for the first time. I've not seen this bin for the past 2 weeks since it was last fed, and I've not seen it since I added that vapor barrier. Hey, get down. I just washed that. I gave this whole surface a nice wipe down earlier so that the camera view would be nice. Now this worm crawled across it. So we've got a whole bunch of kind of surface mulch covering the top, under which we've got some nice castings here and there. You don't have to go far to start seeing some of the food that was fed previously and see that it's breaking down, but we're not going to go very far beyond that as far as giving this a visual examination. For about a month now, I don't even know, maybe longer, I've been committed to treating this container as I should, which is as a flow-through system, which means you add in from the top, and at some point in the future you eject the finished material out the bottom, and you got to allow for that sort of settling to occur, and also for a chance for the worms to make their way to the top surface where all the feedings and the moisture and everything is happening, so that the materials can be harvested from the bottom. So I've been resisting my typical urge of picking through the whole thing and checking out the worms and checking out the material. I've promised myself that I'd allow a quick inspection of the last feeding, and I think we've gotten a pretty good look at it. It's still here in plentiful quantities, I would say, so they certainly would not starve. But now that the weather is starting to warm up, it's springtime, I think their activity is going to start picking up as well, and I think they're going to require a little bit more food. So I'm just gearing up for that and getting some food in here so that we can cover things right back up and let them get back to work. Okay, that looks a little bit better. There was this really wicked reflection over here of the battery pack that's providing the camera power, and it was distracting. I kept looking at it thinking, what the heck is that? So hopefully we're providing a slightly better look into the contents of the bin at this point. And yeah, there's not much left to do here other than drop in their food. So let's grab that tray and dump it. A lot of my feedings in my worm bins consists of me attempting to bury the newly added food down into deep into the material, down within the bin. But in trying to keep with the whole concept of this being a flow-through system and a top-fed sort of a system, I'm going to try to keep to feeding these worms just by throwing their food right onto the top surface. And if I need to, I can just cover it up a little bit. But otherwise, that's about the extent of what I'm going to be doing in all my feedings going forward here. But you know what? Before I cover up, let's just do one more thing. I'm going to take some of this grit. This is a collection of pulverized eggshell that I keep around for strictly this purpose only, just to provide my worms with some grit, some coarse material to aid in their digestion. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, look up the word gizzard on Wikipedia. That's the kind of stomach worms have. They have a gizzard, so they need coarse materials to help their digestion. So this is really cool. I love to see this much moisture in the bin. The worms certainly look content. They're not going to starve. There's adequate food for them, that's for sure. And I think the moisture is exactly on target. It was what I was hoping to get by adding that plastic sheet. When was that? Maybe a week ago now? So I'm really pleased to see the outcome of that trial. And I like it so much that we're just going to stick to it. So I'm putting it all right back the way we found it. Okay, on to the African Nightcrawlers. So for the African Nightcrawlers, it's a similar assortment with some really moldy bread, some potatoes, cucumber, banana peels, carrots, grapes, and other delicious food items. All right, let's get that VermiBag tote out here. Okay, now the VermiBag tote, when it sits in its frame this way, is a pretty tall system. So this is the last of my reveals to see how these plastic sheets of vapor block have been working in all of my bins. I've had a chance to inspect every other bin so far to see how things were progressing. This is the last one where here we're not seeing worms right where the moisture would be collecting up on this sheet of paper. However, I guess they're more than happy to be right beneath it so that as it soaks through they can soak it up. So that was pretty easy. I could just remove those sheets without having to pick worms off of them. We've got a pretty nice number of worms just enjoying the surface out here. And yeah, these gloves have seen better days, but hopefully they'll last till the end of today's worm bin maintenance. This is the last bin that needs attention today. So once we're done here, these gloves are ready to be retired. Now, one thing I'm not seeing though is, I guess, no feeding zone indicator, or maybe there is one and I'm just not seeing it yet. Usually I indicate where the last feeding had occurred, and you know, I didn't really review last feedings video to refresh my memory on things. It's been a couple weeks, so I really don't recall what happened here. So I'm going to assume that we probably fed down the middle, since there's no marking. It's a fair assumption. The material so far looks to me like, you know, small shreds of paper here and there scattered within just pure castings. I don't see any signs of any previous food. So these African Nightcrawlers, they either do a really good job or we're just looking in the wrong place. The moisture level though, you know, I should have probably mentioned that immediately when we started, was the fact that the moisture level in here is really nice, much better than I'm accustomed to. So the plastic bags are totally working for me. And we're finally starting to come upon some of the food items from the last feeding. Pieces of carrot were the pieces that I have located so far. I guess what I'm kind of looking for is here. One of the large food items that we've been checking in on over and over is the corn cob, which is still being worked down, but it's still clearly identifiable as the corn cob. It's still whole. So I'm wondering how long that will be before that is no longer true, and that is also broken down. Now here's a half a mango pit, and little tiny worms eating it as usual. It's usually what I see on the mango pits. Here on the edge we've got some dry material, very dry. It's, well, you know, maybe I'm not being fair. It's the stem of some sort of a vegetable or fruit, so the stem is always definitely a tougher item to compost down. And if it's right there on the side of the bin where it's driest, the lack of moisture is definitely going to inhibit the breakdown of that. So we'll try to help that, move it inboard a little bit more. And here's the next piece of food remnant from previous feedings, the other corn cob. And I mean, these go way back, you know. I mean, if you've been watching my channel, you'll know months have gone by since those corn cobs were placed in here originally. And unless you were faithful or trusting in the fact that it will eventually break down if you just give it enough time, you might have already removed it by now. I think a lot of people just get fed up waiting for the worms to finish breaking down the corn cobs because they take so long. But I've done it in the past, and I've known it to be that way from the start, so I was not surprised and not bothered by it. We've just been checking in on it regularly to see how they're progressing. And hopefully soon they'll be, you know, so broken down that they'll just collapse in my hands. But for now, they're still recognizable cobs of corn. So the worms will keep working it. Other than that, carrots, large chunks of just paper bedding, I believe, for the most part, down in here. The VermiBags, the Nightcrawlers, they've done a nice job breaking down the food they were given. And even though there's some remnants of some food still lingering in here, I'm sure they're going to be happy to see this additional addition to their food supply. Okay, now I guess we're going to want to position these old food items back down in here too before we cover up and before we add the grit. It's very tough little stem thing. We'll stick it right down where the action's going to be. Hopefully it'll be well on its way to being compost in a short while. Okay, go Nightcrawlers, go. These are African Nightcrawlers. I believe they're more active when the weather warms up, and it's finally warming up a bit, so it's not, you know, it's not winter anymore, so I got a feeling that these African Nightcrawlers are going to start picking up speed in terms of how much food they require on a regular basis. I'm still kind of accustomed to their kind of slow, lethargic pace that I've seen all winter, but I think we're going to be in for a little bit of a change once the warmth starts to pick up. Alright, I think I'm going to stick to only covering up with this existing material that's in here, because it still seems fairly abundant. We didn't really see a need for additional bedding in here, at least I didn't think I saw a need for it. I kind of, I like the amount that I'm seeing in here. It's breaking down naturally, but there's still enough of it to keep going, I think, so we're just going to continue with what we had, other than the food that was added. But I don't think there's a need to add any moisture either. So I think on can go the coverings. It's like a little bit of a puddle developing over there. The plastic bag is nothing more than the type of bag you see at a vegetable market to throw your produce into, and a couple other layers of barriers. So that was fun. I'm glad I got my my worms fed today, my Nightcrawlers at least. So we're good for another week, week and a half, I would say. But I'm really glad to see that the moisture in these bins is so improved now that the plastic layers have been put in here. So that's a standard on all my bins now. This was the last of my bins that I've not had a chance yet to inspect to see how it's coming along, and I'm very satisfied. So things are looking up for these African Nightcrawlers, and the material in the bin's looking terrific too. Alright everyone, that's it for today. I appreciate you keeping me company. That was great. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the comments section below. And you know, if you enjoyed the video, and I hope you did, please remember to give me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. Also consider becoming a subscriber to the channel as well. That's really appreciated too. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.